Now, when it comes to selecting a snare drum, most of the time drummers will buy one just based off of its track record. What makes a Ludwig Black Beauty so sought after? Or why is the Superlight something that you see in every recording studio? Besides the sound that these ideal drums are creating, there's also components involved that help make that sound the way that it is. So in this Snare Saturday video, I'm going to be going over 5 things you should be looking out for when selecting a snare drum. For those who might be new to the channel, hi, welcome. My name is Nick Costa, and I am a drummer from Philly, PA. And if you are looking to purchase a snare drum, there are 5 things that you need to consider before making that purchase. And it has to do a whole lot more than the brand of the drum or the sound that it creates. So let's get started with that very first thing, the shell type. And before you decide the type of shell to get, you have to ask yourself, what sound do you want out of your snare drum? Do you want something a bit warmer and more direct? Or do you want something brighter sounding with more overtones? Answering this question will help you narrow it down to if you want a wood snare drum or a metal snare drum. Wood snare drums are a bit more direct and warmer in tone. Whereas metal snare drums are brighter and have more overtones. Once you figure out that bigger picture sound that you're going after, then you can ask yourself, do you prefer the drum to resonate more or less? If you want the drum to resonate less and have more attack, then you want a shallower shell. If you want a drum that's going to ring out a bit longer and have more body to it, then you might want a deeper shell. And don't forget about the diameter of the snare drum. Most snare drums are 14 inches in diameter, but you can find drums that are 15, 13, even 12 and 10 inches in diameter. And remember that craze for the longest time where people were turning floor toms in the snare drums? Yeah, you can find them larger than 15 too if you want. But just make sure that you are getting a diameter that's going to work for you, not just because it looks cool. Moving on to the second thing, the number of lugs that are on the drum. The one thing to remember is that the more lugs that are on a drum, the more direct the sound will be. Take the Ludwig Black Beauty for example. When it was initially released, it was an 8-lug drum, and then it transitioned over to a 10-lug drum and was 10 lugs for the longest time. Now, during Ludwig's 110th anniversary, they reintroduced the 8-lug Black Beauty, but rather than only releasing it as an 8-lug option for that 110th anniversary year, it is something that now stays in the lineup for Ludwig Black Beauties. So now you have the option of choosing some Black Beauties with 8 lugs or 10 lugs. If you want that drum to be a bit more airy and ring out and resonate, go for an 8-lug drum. If you want it to be more direct and punchy, then go for a 10-lug drum. You can even look back to vintage drums like the Ludwig Pioneer or the Ludwig Jazz Festival. Both are 3-ply shells, just the Pioneer is 6 lugs and the Jazz Festival is 8 lugs. Speaking of the number of lugs, the third thing that you should be considering is the type of lug that is on the snare drum. Most lugs are designed the same way. It is something that is bolted onto your shell, And then you have a tension rod that gets threaded into a receiver tube. That's what holds the tension of the tension rod. However, there have been some redesigns over the years to try and be a bit more innovative or to help drummers swap out heads quickly. Now, two types of lugs that come to mind with trying to switch out your heads quickly are the ones that were made on AOT drums and the old Yamaha Nuvo lugs. Some entry-level Yamaha drums had plastic Nuvo lugs, and if you're applying tension to plastic, it's bound to break at some point. So as you're deciding a snare drum to purchase, you want to make sure that the lugs that are on the drum are going to withstand the tuning that you prefer. Some lugs are single-sided, meaning that you can only insert a tension rod on one side. These are ideal for drums that you have higher tensions on. And these types of lugs are mounted closer to the bearing edge, unless of course you have a really shallow drum. Now the other type of lug is a double-sided lug, usually mounted towards the center of the shell. Although these can hold a higher tension, they can't hold as tight of a tension as a single-sided lug. Finally, you have to take a look and see how many post or mounting screws are installed to each lug. If you have a double-sided lug with only one mounting screw, when you start to apply tension to that drum, it's putting a lot of tension on that lug, and it can give out if you prefer higher tensions. Lugs that have two mounting points or two screws help distribute the tension a little bit more evenly, which means you're never going to have to worry about a lug popping as you're playing your drum. So if you're somebody who likes lower tuned snare drums and have a little more beef and body to them, it's okay to have a single post, one screw, double-sided lug, because you're not really putting a whole lot of tension on it. But if you are somebody who likes to have your snare drums cranked really tight, then you might want to look into a single-sided lug that has two mounting posts. Moving on to that fourth item, the hoop. You can take one drum and swap out the hoops and get completely different sounds out of it. And most snare drums are provided with triple flange hoops. Triple flange hoops allow the drum to ring out a bit more, and they're not as heavy as die-cast hoops. Over time, however, die-cast hoops started to become a more common thing that you would see on snare drums. They are heavier than triple flange hoops, and they help control the sound a little bit. Then, of course, you have single flange hoops with clips. These were more common in vintage drums, or modern-day drums that are designed to have a vibe to them. One thing to look out for with single flange hoops, however, is that you have a lot of components and the clips can break if they are under a lot of tension. Plus, if you're somebody who likes to play rim shots like I do, it is not fun when you hit one of those claws. Finally, there are wood hoops, and you can have wood hoops with claws or the Yamaha style where there are holes for the tension rod to go through. Just like the difference between a wood shell and a metal shell, the difference between a wood hoop and a metal hoop are going to give you those same characteristics. A wood hoop is going to be more subdued and a warmer tone, whereas a metal hoop is going to ring out. But besides the sound differences of all of these hoops, each one is going to give you a different tuning experience and feel when you're playing the drum. If you would like to see how hoops can affect the sound of a snare drum, check out the series from drumfactorydirect.com, where Mike Dawson does a shootout between a bunch of different hoops on the same type of drum, so you can hear for yourself the differences that each type of hoop makes. I've put a link for you in the description below. So we have gone over 4 things so far: the shell, the number of lugs, the type of lug, and the hoop. And that brings us to the 5th and final thing, which is the throw-off. A throw-off can make or break a snare drum. Brands like Nickelworks created a name for themselves for having one of the smoothest throw-offs, allowing you to engage and disengage snare wires with ease. Unfortunately, some of the components were made out of plastic, and again, tension with plastic means it's going to break at some point. Then you have other companies like Trick, an extremely well-built throw-off that is super durable, has a locking fine-tuning knob so you never have to worry about the snare wires coming loose, and you also have the option to get them with a 3-point positioning so you can have your snare wires be loose, medium, or tight in tension. These types of throw-offs are pretty heavy, however, so they can add some weight to your snare drum, but they do have an extremely low failure rate. Then you have throw-offs that are somewhat in the middle, like the Ludwig P88 AC throw-off. They are really smooth, so it's super easy to engage or disengage your snare wires, and it has that locking fine-tuning knob, so you don't have to worry about your snares coming loose as you play it, like older throw-offs. And the best part about it is that it's the same hole spacing as some older throw-offs, so if you do have a vintage drum where the throw-off has broken or is no longer reliable, you can swap it out with a modern day throw-off. The last thing you want to do is be playing your drum and have that throw-off disengaging or having your snares come loose over time. So those are the 5 things that you need to look out for when purchasing a snare drum. And I would love to know what some of your preferences are, whether that is the type of shell, the type of hoop, the type of lug, even the throw-off. Whatever your favorites are, let me know in the comment section below. Also, I would love to know what your favorite snare drum is and why it's your favorite snare drum. Maybe it does have a great sound, but maybe there's some components to it, like say the hoops or the lugs, that make you prefer that drum over something else. If you have any other additional questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below as well, and I will try my best to answer them. And if you want to experiment with different types of throw-offs, hoops, or even lugs, check out drumfactorydirect.com. They have everything that you would need to replace broken components on your drum, or if you want to be adventurous and build your own drum, you can do so with all of the parts you can get from their website. Now, full disclosure, Drum Factory Direct did not pay me to say any of this. It's a website that I have used in the past and one that you should check out if you want to experiment with some different components on your snare drum. And that is it. Thank you so much for checking out this video on the 5 things you need to look out for when purchasing a snare drum. And until next time, see you later.